All right, well, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. And this exhibition is called To Hell and Back, My Summer with Dante. I want to talk a little bit about the exhibition in general, and then I'm going to give you sort of a walkthrough of what it's like to spend the summer with Dante, really. This work, these paintings, are part of my doctoral degree that I'm working on at the Toronto School of Theology, Doctor of Ministry program, part of U of T. And I'm working with two different professors, so I'm going to get two different credits for this work. And one is on the topic of grace, the artist as a vessel or a channel of grace. And the other is on homiletics. And for those of you that don't know what that is, homiletics means preaching. And so it's about relaying God's word or whatever to other people, usually through words. And I'm going to show that you don't have to use words, that you can also do that same sort of thing with images. Or at least that's what I hope I'm going to show. All right, and before I get started, I would like to thank Susan Hudson for helping me hang. For the hanging, and my husband John, who got everything, he got everything level, and then Susan got it tweaked so that it was looking the way it should. And then, thank you to John Ray for coming down to tape this for me for YouTube, and to my son John. So many Johns in my life, right? My son John for going to fetch the other John. So. All right, so we'll get started here. To begin, I wanted to recommend, if any of you haven't read The Divine Comedy, how many of you have, just out of curiosity? Some of you? Okay. If you haven't, or if you tried to and got 12 pages in and just decided to ditch it, like some I know, you might want to try this one. I think his name is pronounced John Ciardi. Something like that. Anyhow, it's a wonderful translation, and he's a poet, so it's very smooth. The writing is smooth. He's an Italian poet and writes poetry, obviously, in English as well. So I highly recommend that, and I'm just going to put that back there because I think that my son likes to read this.
Yeah, let's read it.
Yeah. All right. So. The way that I started this exhibition was to study the works of other artists who have illustrated Dante. Because if you're in an academic environment, that's what you do. So I chose William Blake and Gustave Doré, and I chose them mainly because they were accessible. And by that, I don't mean that it was easy. I meant that I could find books, because it's just not all that easy. And what I did was I read through those, looking at the pictures and studying the pictures for compositional similarities, trying to see if there was something that I could borrow from that to use as the basis, the foundation for my own compositions. So that's where I started. Now, Dante, just a little background, Dante's Divine Comedy is made of 3 books, the Inferno, we'll look at here, the Purgatorio, and Paradiso. It was written a little later, but set in the year 1300. And that would be just a short time after Thomas Aquinas, who's really well known in Christian theology for his very famous Summa Theologica. And he died in 1274. So at that time, religion and art and politics were all mixed together. And sometimes that still seems to happen, but it's different now. Maybe it isn't. I was just thinking about the news. Anyhow, so he was writing. Dante was very politically minded, and he was writing at a time when he had been, exiled from Florence to Ravenna. And so he, in his work, he uses actual people, and it's a really good way to get back at people. Never piss off a writer, okay? Because you never know what they can do if you do that. And so these people are infamous now, but probably not in ways they'd like to be. So the story begins with the Inferno, or hell, and what I'm going to do, I have picked out certain verses. The book is written in verse, and each book is called a canticle, and each chapter is a canto. And so I've taken from the different cantos something that is, I think, representative of what I've done, or tried to do, and also something that would lead the story along, because it is a narrative. And part of what I'm trying to do is to go back to that piece of work, which is a beautiful piece of work, and reintroduce it. The literalism, Dante is extremely graphic. His images of really bad stuff are you can see them in your mind. And so the illustrations traditionally have also been very graphic and negative for the most part, except for Paradiso, and there aren't many illustrations of that one. So I wanted to do something that was not illustrative in that way, but still told the story. Personally, I think that Dante would still be a really good tool in the study of theology or religion. It's just that those images are the ones that we think of, and they are, I have to be careful not to get myself in trouble here, and they are responsible for some of the really bad theology that many of us grew up with and have rejected. So I don't know that I can save the theology, and in fact I don't want to. Not that particular brand. But I do want to try to rescue Dante from that. So that's why the different approach to this work. So I will start with this one, Darkwood. So Dante finds himself, he says, this is from his Inferno, midway in our life's journey I went astray from the straight road and woke to find myself alone in a dark wood. And it sounds to me like a bit of a midlife crisis. So I tried to create something of what that might feel like. For Dante, it was an awakening of midlife and what do I do now, and what have I done, and where am I going to go, and all that sort of thing. And I think that most people in this room might have some experience with that. So he tries to get back out. So he's sitting in the woods and he's looking up and he can see the sky, and he tries to get back out, but he can't get out because there are she-beasts and all kinds of critters and whatever, there are 3 actually, that prevent him from doing that. So he's just exasperated, sort of at the bottom goes into a sleep or trance or whatever, and he's awakened by Virgil, the poet Virgil, ancient poet Virgil. And Virgil has been sent by Beatrice, who represents divine love, and he's going to lead Dante out of this terrible place, out of this darkness. Now, when Dante wrote his book, Beatrice represents divine love. Virgil kind of represents human reason. And so as we go through, human reason will take so far, and then we'll pick up with Beatrice again. So Beatrice has come to Virgil and said, Dante is down here. Oh, and I meant to mention that Beatrice was an actual character in his life. She was a woman that he was in love with when he was very young, but she died. He didn't ever get a chance to be with her the way that he wanted to. So it's probably why he used her in his book. So now Virgil and Dante start to make the journey. And Virgil tells Dante, well, we're going to have to go the difficult way. You can see the light, but we can't go that way. We have to go through hell. We have to go down. And we will be protected because divine love protects you wherever you are. So we move through to this painting, which I've called the Shades. Now, Shades that was the name given to people who were dead. And when Dante was seen by other souls, we'll say, in his journey, he would cast a shadow, whereas no one else would. Lots of Hollywood stuff there, huh? And because of that, people knew that he was alive and he shouldn't be there, and why is he there? And so Virgil was his guide, and Virgil was his protector the whole way through. So this is the shades. A company of shades came into sight walking beside the bank, and they stared at us. And then we move along here to the river Styx. And of course, that's picked up from Greek mythology as well. And the river Styx. So this is in chapter 2, I believe, where there's a sign at the entrance that says, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. So, of this, Dante writes, bury here and forever all hope of paradise. I come to lead you to the other shore, into eternal dark, into ice and fire. And so then, we're moving along here. What I've been trying to do so far is, you'll notice the mosaic style, which is a carryover from earlier works that I've done. And so I'm using it, but I'm kind of leaving it behind as we go deeper and deeper, because the Inferno is sort of on ledges, going down and down and down. And so I decided to sort of use that as one way of making that progression. So these little red spots kind of, for me, they suggest the presence of Virgil and Dante, and they take sort of different shape too. I tried to work at random as much as I could. I decided to use 3 colors, which I more or less chose at random, except that, I kept them within the primary base, and black and white, and used those for everything, until I got there. And so, you have sort of the same color going along. But when it came to a lot of this stuff, it was very hard for me to know where to put it. And so sometimes, I guess I didn't want to have to go over it, because with acrylic paint you can go over it and change it. And so it was more or less just load up the brush and, where is it? That's where it is. And I'm really happy with how they landed. So I'm going to say that was great. Now this image, this is Cocytus, and that means hell. This is at the bottom. Now, when I read this book, I was really quite surprised, because when I think of hell, I think of fire and brimstone and all that kind of stuff. But actually, at the very pit in Dante's work is a block of ice, and wedged in this ice is Lucifer. And I think this is where you get that phrase, when hell freezes over, maybe. So Lucifer is wedged into the block of ice, and he has 3 faces. And each of his faces is chewing eternally, one on the body of Judas Iscariot. I think we talked about this. And the others are Brutus and Cassius. So that's their eternal place. So as they move down, there are all these monsters and very graphic descriptions of evil. And Dante is actually quite a funny guy, because he tries to make the punishment fit the crime. So he's got, for example, the one I remember I like to say is the soothsayers or the fortune tellers. Their eternal damnation is that their heads are put on backwards and they drool into their buttocks. So he had a special distaste for clergy, and that, of course, if you think back, was the time of indulgences. Just before, a few centuries before Martin Luther decided that was a really bad idea. And so this is actually taken from the cover of the book. The clergy have their heads in the ground and their legs sticking up out of the mud and the flames and so on. And really, really gruesome. Like in the ice, there are people, depending on how bad your sin was, there are people who are up to here, so they could talk, but they're always crying and the tears are breaking off. And then there's some whose eyelids wouldn't close and they're crying all the time. And then it's just sort of eternal damnation at its best, or worst, I guess you'd say. So, pretty scary stuff. Now, I actually call this one the horror, according to this. Oh, this one is the horror, right? Virgil said, "What are you waiting for? Why do you stare as if you could not tear your eyes away from the mutilated shadows passing there?" And so I think I'd probably be looking. It's like us going after, look at fire or an ambulance or something, I suppose. Hard to turn your eyes away. Now the one in the edge here, I don't know if you get a good shot of that, John. This is actually one of my favorites. And fortunately I have it here, so I have to read that part. This is the chasm. So what happens is he goes, Dante goes with Virgil, follows Virgil by an opening by Lucifer's thigh. Very vivid. So the two of them sort of slide down there, and then it's a whole new world. Because before that, they were always looking down, and now they're looking up, and they see the feet of Lucifer sort of dangling there. And they move from there along to sort of an island before they start the climb on Mount Purgatory. So this is the chasm. This is the difference, hell and then beyond hell. One of the interesting things about this area in the Inferno is that there is no escape. If you find yourself there, that is where you will be. There's no hope. Enter or abandon all hope. He really meant that. So the chasm. My guide and I crossed over and began to mount that little known and lightless road to ascend into the shining world again. And so I wanted to sort of indicate that there is some more light at the end of this tunnel. Not for these guys, but for the protected ones that are going through. Now, at this point, I had to part company with Blake and Dore. I was finding that it was really stifled by sticking to their compositions. And in fact, some of them don't really. I mean, they're composites at best. But I decided that I really needed to do something that was more my own response to Dante's work. So I was talking with one of the professors who's involved in this, and I said, I think I understand. I got it. I got what the book is about. And that was the idea that Virgil leads Dante through all of this so that Dante will be purified, etc. But Dante, in his work, in his artwork, in this book, had become my Virgil. So now I didn't need Dore and I didn't need Blake. I just needed Dante. And for me, that's the way art works. Art has many functions, many purposes. But for me, one of the most important roles is that it encourages the creativity of other people. And so when that happened for me, it was like bingo, I got it. That's exactly what the book did, what it was supposed to do. And so I left the sort of academic stuff behind, took the leap of faith, and decided to complete the rest of the works without making reference back to these other artists. And that's probably why you see, maybe one of the reasons you see a big difference in the kinds of work. I stuck with basically the same palette. I added a color here or there, but pretty much the same palette as here. Just a lot more white. Okay, so before we move over to Purgatorio, which we'll go to next, I will tell you that I tried to do Purgatorio as soon as I finished this, because I'm a very logical person, right? You do this, you go this way, that's how you do it. And everything that I did, all 6 images, were crappy. So I just was really depressed and decided I needed to do something else. And I found that I just couldn't get the other 2 artists, the literal interpretations, out of my mind. So I thought, because they did so few visuals of the Paradiso, that I'll go there. And then I wouldn't have any material to worry about. So I started to work on those. And I started from this end, actually. So what I did, it appears I'm going to talk about this a little bit first. No, I'm not. I'll just say that I did this, and then I did probably all but the first two. And then I realized that I didn't know how to finish. Because the transition pieces are very important, or they are to me, like to get from one to another. Usually, or in Dante's work, it's a river, but crossing a river and then things change. So we'll go over here. Okay, now this one I'm calling the cleanse. And after Dante goes through the chasm and they begin to start up the Mount of Purgatory, Virgil needs to cleanse Dante. So he takes some water and from the dew, morning dew, and he puts it on Dante's face as a symbolic gesture. And Dante says in response to that, I lifted my stained cheeks to him, and there he made me clean, revealing my true color under the residues of hell's black air. So I was really trying to get into that idea of purging. My Roman Catholic theology is so bad, just so bad. I mean, I didn't know what limbo was. I kind of knew what purgatory was, but not really. So I learned that limbo is actually where Virgil was, where he was living, because that was the place kept for virtuous pagans, or people born before the time of Christ. So nice for them to have a place, huh? And it's not a bad place, but it's not paradise. But anyway, they're okay. That's where they stay. And purgatorio, or purgatory, is about purging. And somehow I just didn't ever really connect those words together. So I took an old painting, and it was not the one we were talking about. I took an old painting that had a lot of stuff on it, and I started using a knife, like a putty knife, chisel, all kinds of stuff, and gouged into it. And it was really interesting because underneath I saw there was yet another painting, the archaeological dig. These canvases are expensive, so we like to reuse them, isn't that true? So I kept digging and digging and digging, and I found these different kinds of textures and colors and so on. So when I got far enough, I wanted to leave some of the surface as well to show the black still that we're talking about. So after gouging into it, then I sort of washed it with all of the colors using this kind of motion, sort of the chakras, all of the chakra colors going into the center, and just really, really thin, and let it kind of soak in for a while. And then when it dried, I just simply took a roller and went over it. My, that makes painting so much faster, so much easier. Just rolled it over and left it flat so that it would contrast with the glazes that are underneath, so it would be duller, to represent that stuff that sticks on the outside. So I began purging, and I have a lot to purge, and I'm definitely not going to talk about that in this context at all. So this is the cleanse. And once the cleansing takes place, then we start. We're on the move. And this is the entrance. Dante says, what a difference between these trails and those of hell. Here every entrance fills with joyous song, and there with savage wails. So, eventually going to move back to the mosaic technique, but not quite yet. These are shock rags. I love shock rags. They have the best texture for collage, and so I use some of those, and heaven knows what else, whatever was around. But I wanted to, when you cleanse, when you purge, it's not a one-shot deal, right? It's at least not for all of us. So it takes a while, and so I wanted to sort of continue, some of the black into the rest of the pieces. So this one I call the Earth Siren. The heavens cry to you, and all around your stubborn souls wield their external glory, and yet you keep your eyes fixed on the ground. And so, in the context of the comedy, again, it's hard to, I mean, there's a lot of cliches around that, but it really is hard to grasp something new when you're already hanging on to something with both arms as tight as you can that isn't new. And so that's part of the awakening that Dante goes through. And of course, Virgil helps him with this, being closely related to human reason, helping him understand this. So we get to here, and this is the leap of faith. And he says, I have led you here by grace of mind and art. Now let your good pleasure be your guide. You are past the steep ways, past the narrow part. So from here, Virgil is starting to encourage Dante to think for himself, to move into the direction of his own heart, instead of sort of following along. He still does follow Virgil. There's no real danger for him here, because everybody who goes to purgatory gets into paradise. It's just a matter of how long you have to purge. And that, of course, depends on what you've done, according to Dante and others. So we have, again, the mosaic pattern starting to come back in a little more color and moving into sort of a merging of color here, where we have the calm. So we have your leap of faith and your calm before your storm, I guess. My soul hung tranced in joy beyond all measure and yearning for yet more as I moved through those first fruits of the eternal pleasure. And so from here, things are starting to really, really change. Dante is anticipating his move into paradise or paradisio, and he understands that he and Virgil will be parting company very soon. So we come up to here, and you may have noticed, if you've looked at some of this and other works that I've done, that I use a lot of biblical text. And these are actual pages of actual Bibles, and some of them are English, and some are Hebrew, and some are Greek, and so on. And I like to do that because part of what my work is about is combating literalism. And so I like to use the actual text so that when we talk about the Word of God, and this will be really important for my homiletics essay, when we talk about the Word of God, that does not mean printed ink on a page. And so, although there are a lot of people that think that, I don't think that, and so that's why I'm trying to do that here, use that here. So we have some nice bright colors happening, and things are going all well, and then there's this break in this piece, and I wanted to just sort of throw some Asian influence in there and so on, because it's amazing how open Dante is. Remember, he's living at the same time as Giotto, and so while Giotto is doing all these really interesting things in art, which are also religious, Dante is working at the same time, basically, as him. So Giotto, for example, introduced, I mean, in art history you learn one thing about it. You learn about painting and how he went from flat images to introduce depth, etc., etc. But in theology, what you can find if you look for it is that he creates typologies. Giotto, I'm sidetracking just a bit, but Giotto started to paint in the narrative, which was not done. And there were a lot of stories about the saints and so on, and so Giotto gathered those stories and he would make sequences. And then he would hang the sequences in the Arena Chapel, in Padua and other places to correspond with other stories, like the story of creation, the story of Christ, and St. Francis, and so he created these kinds of image to image to image to image things. So there's a lot of really cool stuff happening, a lot of big changes in preparation for what became the Renaissance. So what I'm trying to say is that Dante included a lot of universal stuff that Aquinas would just not have light at all. Had he read it, but of course he was dead, so that was good. So I wanted to just sort of throw a little in there just to, give it its due. So this represents the final river that stands between Dante and the Paradiso. And this is two rivers in one. And the rivers Lev and Ino, I'll call it that. Dante writes, I came back from those holiest waters new, remade, reborn, like a sun-wakened tree that spreads new foliage to the spring dew, in sweetest freshness healed of winter's scars, perfect, pure, and ready for the stars. So what happens here is he drinks the water of the river from this side, where Virgil is, human reason, and in doing that, in drinking of this water, he forgets all the bad things. It all goes behind him. And then he crosses, Virgil stays here, he crosses over, and he drinks again from the same river. At this time, the river causes him to remember all goodness, or all good things. And so now he's been completely purified, and he is ready to meet with Beatrice, divine love, who will take you beyond human reason. Just can't resist it, but it's not hidden. So, divine love, Paradiso. Now I can tell you how this came about. As I said, these two were causing me a lot of trouble. I had no problem doing those. These two I just couldn't figure out what I was going to do. I had started by taking these canvases out of my deck, which is quite big, and putting them down so that the centers were, this is down here now, all together. That's why they get progressively smaller, and the centers are lined up instead of the tops and the bottoms. And what I wanted to show is that the purging continues in the Paradiso, but in a different way. So getting to that primal state, that paradise, whatever, heaven, whatever word you want to use for it, is not a getting something, but a taking away of stuff. And so in order to do that, visually, I had to go paint backwards technically, because it's much easier to add paint onto stuff than to take paint off of stuff. So I started back there with gold leaf, and I chose gold leaf because in painting, I don't know, what are you going to choose? What can represent what can't be represented, right? So gold leaf is pretty special and expensive. And so I thought, okay, it's kind of cliche, but we'll go with that. So the first image has gold leaf. They all have a wee bit somewhere in them. And then what I would do is I would lose something, each one coming backwards. So this is actually an installation for me. This is one painting because, all parts are important to sort of say what it is that I wanted to say with it. So I did that as an underpainting. And that way I knew I would be able to tie the images together in terms of their color, color, etc. And so then I started back there, and I started painting backwards. The one on the far end had only blue on it to begin with, and then, only gold first, and then a little blue, and so on. So the next one has some blue and loses the gold. The next one has no blue and loses, and adds another kind of gold, and then so on and so on and so on. So that's the way they were created, but they're meant to be read this way, if reading is what you can call it. So, this one is called Transformed. And I love this. This is the first verse of Paradiso. And no, it isn't, I lie. It's in the first canto, though. How speak transhuman change to human sense? Let the example speak until God's grace grants the pure spirit the experience. I just love that because, how can you say what can't be said? That's very Taoist. Well, maybe you could paint it, but you really know you can't. So you do the best that you can. But in artwork, I think what I find really interesting is that you can, and this happens in text too, but maybe more especially in images, you can prepare or help to prepare an environment, a visual environment, for someone to have an experience. And so while you can't maybe make sense to other people of what something is, you can present something that will be an example of that, so that maybe they can have their own experience. So from here we move to, we've got transformed and nurtured. The ecstasy that is my heavenly boon conceals me. I am wrapped within its aura as a silkworm is enclosed in a cocoon. And so, I wanted to have this sort of breaking out kind of thing. And these are those lovely Asian papers that you can buy in Chinatown in Toronto. So when I was there last, I dragged John down, and he can carry a lot. More gold. So I'm starting, as you see, to increase in the golds. But at this point, it's still mostly gold paint and little tiny bits of gold leaf, but not a lot. These are still just different kinds of gold papers. And then we come to this one. And this is Awakened. And he says, and I was with the sun, but no more aware of my ascent than a man is of a thought that comes to mind until he finds it there. Or a woman. I really relate to that, because for me, and maybe for some of you as well, I live so much in my head that I sometimes don't know what I think until I talk about it and say, oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, interesting. Maybe I'm saying a little too much about me here. Again, back to the biblical text, and this one actually all of them, you can hang different ways. In fact, Susan and I, when we were putting the show together, doing the tweaks and touch-ups, a few of them are upside down from how they originally were hung. But they're kind of made to be that way. So even, for example, the text here is upside down here and right side up here, so if you turn it up the other way, and so on. And same with all of them. And I like that, because that again, is one thing that is you can't really do with text. You can change an image around, and it'll still have some kind of meaning for a spectator, maybe different. But if you read a text backwards, it's not going to probably do much for you. Well, unless you're in The Exorcist or something. All right, I'm not used to people not laughing at my jokes. Okay, now these three are a group. So I've sort of grouped them in because they're kind of little themes. And this one was really the get it on kind of one. And so we've been awakened. Here we are. Now we know what's going on. Sustained. My soul has hungered long. Breathe forth at last the words that will appease it. There on earth there is no food with which to break its fast. I love that too. So here we have a lot more biblical text. That combating of literalism again, starting to grow with the gold leaf a bit, and it's kind of a sporadic pattern, no pattern really, just trying to balance things here and there, and lots of matte and glaze put on it just to make it look duller, sort of thing. Another literalism thing. Then the next one, this is called Enlightened. It says, then radiating bliss in sight and sound, the Spirit added to his opening words others I could not grasp, they were too profound. So what I did was I took the literal text, the words, and decided if they're going to be too profound, that one way I could do that was to put them in a blender. So this is the Bible in a blender. Thank you, I did get a laugh. And the idea, the idea being that it is not the word on the page again. It's just the same idea over again, really. that I wanted to distort it, and just ripping it up wasn't enough because I do that all the time. So I had to come up with something really different, and the blender did it for me. So it sort of turned it gray. I didn't expect that. The ink all bleeds. And I didn't put any water in it either. I just put it in there. And so, enlightened. So now, at this point, words are not something that are part of Dante's journey. When divine love takes over, there are no words to express. And so you have to move sort of beyond that. This one is freed. She saw, this is Beatrice speaking. She saw in the vision of God who sees all things what silence held my eager tongue in check, and said to me, give your soul's impulse wings. So there's permission. You know, this is not a cut and dry kind of thing where you got to do this and this and this. The spheres within Paradiso, as Dante writes it, is a freeing kind of thing. It's not a constricted theological step-by-step, got to do this, got to believe that. It's very inviting and open. And so no text, but a lot of gold leaf and sort of different kinds of gold leaf in there. And then we come to the rose, the mystic rose, which of course represents the Virgin. The rose in which the Word became incarnate is there. There are the lilies by whose color men found the road, thus that evermore runs straight. And so more Aquinas type theology. At this point, I mean, this one really is different from the others, and it sort of represents this one as, I kind of didn't know which one to put that way. Again, they could all be, and they all were at one time in different directions. But I just kind of wanted that one. I saw that as a separation from this kind of way of being to this other way of being. And so when you talk about here, when he says the rose in which the Word became incarnate, again we have the Word, but there are no words. And so, the Word in this case is person. And so we move on, we've got acceptance. Now hear this, and beyond all doubt believe it. The good of grace is in exact proportion to the ardor of love that opens to receive it. Okay, I like that. And so the sort of moving, what I'm trying to create here is moving into that space. And picking up again with the mosaic in different kinds of ways. From acceptance, we have a revelation. I saw a point that radiated light of such intensity that the eye it strikes must close or forever lose its sight. And that, of course, is biblically reminiscent of no one can see God and live, which is kind of Taoist in a way, except that there's not a God in the Taoist way of thinking. But the Tao that can be said is not the Tao. So the name that can be named, that sort of thing. So from there, we're moving from the revelation to the Empyrean, and this is paradise. Beatrice has to go back here, and she takes her place, and then Dante goes alone because his soul has been given wings. His own insight leads him now, and so he goes back. He goes forward this way through all of this lovely, beautiful gold. And in the paintings, the historical paintings of illustrations of Dante, these would be the ones where you have these stairs of people floating upward and that kind of stuff. So I didn't really want to do that. So we're moving here, and now we have the blue. And picking back up from here, moving on to... or this one I should read, that lest you should fall backward when you flare your mortal wings, intending to mount higher, remember grace must be acquired through prayer. And so, that sort of humility kind of aspect, which leads to this. And I, who neared the goal of all my nature, felt my soul at the climax of its yearning, suddenly as it ought, grow calm with rapture. And so from here, we go to here. So Dante's journey in all of this is not for Dante. It's for whoever is here now. And so when I had my revelation or epiphany at the end of Inferno, where Dante became my Virgil, then by me doing my art in response to Dante's art, I can become Dante or Virgil for someone else. And so the idea is that the enlightened person, especially I would say creative, enlightened person, goes through the process so that they can be of assistance to others. And it's the idea is, remember I was doing the torsos for so long, and they were, just no bottom, no top. And the idea of vessel. We are channels of grace and divine love, goodness, whatever flows through us. If you stuff it up, plug all the holes, you probably explode. So, that's it. Blessed to be a blessing. And are there any questions? Now that you've been through hell and back, yes? Barbara.
It seems to me, generally speaking, I know it's not specific, but you started with the Inferno, which is several of the pieces are really quite big. In fact, I think they're the biggest of the group. And as you move along, it becomes more and more refined and smaller, almost jewel-like, until you end up with the essence of paradise. Was that scale change intentional?
It was that kind of intention that comes through a really quick intuition. Mm-hmm. So it was when I did six paintings here and 6 here. So 6 Inferno and 6 Purgatorio. And I was going to do 6 here. But when I started, I realized I can't do that in 6. I'm going to need more. So I did 12. And Dante had this real thing with numbers. The number 3 was really important to him. So I thought, he'd probably like this, 6, 12, that kind of thing.
Was the final one intentionally smallest?
Yes.
Pardon?
Yes.
Yeah.
But the whole thing was an intuition. It was like, I was trying to think, okay, what happens here? If you're disappearing into paradise, it seemed to me that you would be going further into yourself, further. Like, I really like Jungian psychology as a language for this kind of discussion, where you have the idea of the collective unconscious, and so the further that you move inward, it's like you go inside yourself so far that you step over a line and you're in a completely different place. And that's kind of how I saw that. Except he doesn't stay there; he comes back and takes somebody else through. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. And, the mosaics, sure, I can do that. Right here. Now, I have to come over here, probably Johnny can see up here. Okay, Susan calls this my Baroque corner. And mainly because of the frames, I think. These represent the virtues that are really important to Dante. There are 3 theological virtues and 4 cardinal virtues. The theological virtues are the ones that come from divine grace. And so they're not things that you can do, but things that God does through you, according to Dante. And they are love, faith, and that's not one of them. Love, faith, and hope. There is hope. The arrangement didn't work well to hang various ones together. When you come right down to it, it's going to be the artwork that's going to take precedence over the other aspects of what I do. So those are the theological virtues, and I am having so much fun with these, because as I sort of went through that whole ordeal of the Divine Comedy, you can see that that's a lot of work. It's a lot of intellectual work. It takes, well, more than the summer, but I only really had the summer to pull it all together in terms of the visuals. And sometimes it's just nice to not have to work so hard in your head. And so these, I love doing these because I love the tapping under the stones and just the, the breaking in pieces, and I especially love the glitter. I just love shiny stuff. So my son was doing some major landscape renovations for our next door neighbor and our own property as well. They kind of linked together. And he unearthed these. And they were rusted that way, and one locked and one open. So it seemed to me that was a really good symbol for love. And so these are, help me please, Swarovski crystals. Nice crystals. Sort of exploding out, and then there's marble. And again, these are pieces of metal that are rusted. I absolutely love rust, and I decided I was going to work in rust. I haven't had time yet because I've been doing all the academic work. But my son, again, who's very strong, went with me to the New Ross Farms, and we gathered up rusty pieces from the blacksmith pile. And it was really neat because I asked if I could have them, and the woman in charge said, "Oh, yes, you can." And, honey, come on in. We're just finishing up. So the woman said, "Yeah, you can have them." And then by the time I go back, or I go back the next day, she said, "Look, I'm sorry, but I found that I'm not really allowed to give that to you." So she said, "This is a one-time deal." So my son John and I filled 2 of those big Rubbermaid tote things and got the horses to haul them up the hill for us. So I want to get that. And then the next thing I did was I got a tetanus shot because I know that I'm going to cut myself. And so this is from that as well, the rusty coil. And this is sort of a tree of life kind of thing, the faith. Another, again, loving shiny things. I use fossils and gemstones sometimes. And so that's pyrite. And this one, Solomon and I talked about this. This is bismuth crystals. Bismuth, is that how you say that? And they're really interesting, but the crystal is heated or something, so it's not found naturally this way. But when it's heated, it forms these architectural layers, and they look like tiny little skyscrapers. So I can't read them up, of course, but they really sparkle. Now these, there's another one in the window. This one is Prudence, and it's polished ammonite with marble. And so these are all marble and smalty glass. And then over here, this is selenite, yes, for justice. Justice I had a hard time thinking about. I mean, these ones seem... yeah, and I'm sort of not sure that I really captured it, but I was sort of going for... I can't see it. I was sort of going for a change, like from the order of one order to the order of another order, because, sometimes what seems just to us is not just, and sometimes what seems unjust really is, and I couldn't figure out how to portray that. So far, that's what I came up with, and that's lapis, by the way. Isn't that pretty? And the one up here is, which I can't reach because I'm short, Fortitude, and these are pebbles gathered from the southern shore of Crete. And Susan's tall.
Game show.
Yes.
When I went to this, like this, here you go, folks.
And so I love those stones. They're polished by the sea. They're tumbled by the sea, and they're so smooth there. It's just, I thought, that's a good thing to do with those. Thank you, Susan.
Yes.
And then the one down here is, this is hope. And actually Dante chooses red and green and white for his theological virtues. He doesn't give a color for any of the other ones. So the white, I thought, I think this is kind of cool. There's like 6 strands or more of freshwater pearls in there. And some marble, and then this lovely fossil that I found that looks kind of Madonna-esque, I thought. So I put that for hope. So it's a geode. I'm not exactly sure which one. And then the one in the window, which is on the easel, I can turn it because Susan has it hooked up really, really well. And another ammonite here. And these are, I don't know if you can zoom in on that or not, John, but, you know, as an artist, I look at that and I think, yeah, there's nothing I could do that would even come close to that. They're so beautiful. And so, you know, you do what you can. So I've got slate and smalty and tried to pick up some of the colors. And then, of course, the classical Byzantine style of laying the mosaics in. And this one is temperance. Took me some to do that. Yeah, so those are the mosaics. I do hope to get back. I'd like to do some outdoor mosaics using rust. So if anybody wants a nice big rusty outdoor mosaic, you can let me know. So, are there any questions about any of these? All right. Well, thank you very much, all of you. Really appreciate it.